All right, it's here. The RBC add-on, ready to go. Basic idea of this add-on is to easily set up a physics rig for your car models. I'm just going to show you an overview of how to use it. So after you download the master file, go ahead and unzip it. Inside you'll see two files. You got the RBC Rig Blender file and the add-on file. So let's go ahead and install the add-on here. Go to your preferences, install add-on file, enable the RBC add-on. And while we're here in the preferences under experimental, and we're going to enable undo legacy, let's go ahead and find a model. I'm just importing this from Sketchfab by Carol. This is probably the most boring part you're going to have to do. Is just to separate your car into separate objects. Basically, you want to separate the car body from the wheel objects, and we want 4 wheel objects all separated. And if your vehicle uses any brake calipers or anything that you want to be attached to the wheel but not rotate with the wheel, you go ahead and separate those two. So just some quick tips to join everything together is Control J's to select a bunch of objects and join them together into one object. Select one of the wheels, select P to separate. And we'll go ahead and separate by selection. We'll just do this for each one of the wheels and make sure that they're all individual objects, and also the calipers are individual objects as well. So once we have all the boring stuff done, we'll go ahead and go to the RBC add-on. You can find it on the right side in the viewport. So let's click on the folder and find our master file with our RBC Rig blend file in it. Make sure that the blend file is selected before importing. Go ahead and click import RBC Rig. And this will import our rig along with a ground plane for us to play on. I'm going to scale and orientate our car model here, as long as you get it to a rough size of the rig. But the orientation is important. So the pointy end is the front. So you want to make sure that your vehicle is oriented correctly before the rigging setup process. So for our rigging setup, select our car body, select our front right wheel. I'm going to go ahead and change the position. As long as your back left wheel. So imagine, I think you know your right to left. And for each one of the wheels, you can add brake calibers. So go ahead and select your brake caliber object and click add underneath the correct wheel. Go ahead and attach your brake calibers by selecting the brake caliber and clicking add to whichever wheel it belongs to. And after you have everything set up, click generate rig. Once we click generate rig, we already have a drivable vehicle. So that's pretty cool. Because this rig uses the caching system, to move the rig, you have to be on the first frame. If you try to move it on any other frame, it's not going to work because the object's already cached. So you just shift left arrow to the beginning and you can move it around. So the next step would be the rigging tuning, and this is where you tune the settings of the rig to your specific vehicle. So we'll start off with steering. A pivot point is just the point that the wheel's going to rotate around. Turning radius, and this is how far your wheels will rotate. Typically 35 to 45 is where I keep it, depending on your vehicle. Moving on to the suspension. So your suspension limits, going to limit how high or low your suspension is. This is good to keep your wheels from intersecting with your car body. Under suspension, spring stiffness is just going to be how stiff your suspension is going to be. And spring dampening is going to be how bouncy your suspension is before settling. All right, let's move on to the weight. This is going to be under the physics, and this is going to be the weight of your car body. And you don't want to mess with this too much because this will influence the spring and dampening settings as well. So it's kind of a balancing act with these settings. It's the weight of the car body, and you can go ahead and shift the weight of the vehicle. For example, if you want front, you set the sphere in the front and press apply weight shift. Moving on to tire friction. Tire friction is going to be the friction of your tires, and we have a lever that can either apply more friction to the front tires or the back tires. If I'm going to play with the front and back tire friction, I like to keep the tire friction a little bit lower. Moving on, we'll go to motor torque. Torque is going to be the power of the motor, I guess. Be the best way to simplify it. So you want to increase that if you want more speed. And under motor torque, you're going to find the roll constraint. And so this is helpful for some certain cases. If your wheels have a lot of friction and you're turning at a sharp point, you're going to flip over. So this will keep your vehicle from flipping. Reset all to default button, just to reset all your settings. We got a play and restart button underneath that, just for convenience. So the pivot point, turn radius, and limits all have to be reset to the beginning to notice a change. So to do that quickly, it's a shift left arrow. It's just a cut back to the first frame. And so you tweak that setting and then cut back to the first frame to quickly tune up your rig. Under the Rig Control panel, you're going to find your drive and steering settings. So positive number drives forward and a negative number drives backwards. And your brake, we have your brake function right here. So we can enable and disable that. We have the ability to either clear our settings or disable them. So this is helpful if you already have keyframes in them and you want to go back and tune your rig up a little bit more. You can disable those without losing your keyframes. So this is the animation section. You're going to find two options. You have the cache and the keyframe option. So the way rigid bodies works is they use this caching system. So our rig's going to use the caching system as well. So what we can do is drive our vehicle around, and already our vehicle is being cached. So with a rigid body object selected, you'll notice this down at the bottom, this yellow bar. So from what we've played already, we can go ahead and record cache, and that'll save the cache. So making animations and stuff is super easy. So you'll notice this cache bar down at the bottom is what's already been played out, but it hasn't been saved. So we could have to record cache to save the cache, so we can scrub through and play our animation. And you can either do this after you drive it around or before you drive it, whichever. It'll work both ways. So that's one way to record your car animation. Under keyframe, you're going to find the record keyframes, and this is going to start your recording right away. And this is going to record your steering and drive values. So what's cool about this is it's going to use the same caching system. It's always going to use the same caching system. But with the keyframes, we can delete our cache and we can have a new cache. With our new cache, we can change pretty much anything in the tuning section, but still keep our drive and steering values. For instance, if I wanted to move the keyframes up a little bit, I can move those. And this is a good example. Maybe your vehicle rolls over and you don't want it to roll over. You can go ahead and add a roll constraint. And so that's pretty cool. But with tweaking all this, it's only going to save your drive and steering values. So it's not going to play the same animation as it was before if you're messing with the tuning section. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and add some objects for our car to collide with. Just going to import these from Sketchfab and select all our objects. Just click Add Collision. You have active collisions, which are things that'll move around when your vehicle collides with it, and passive objects, which would be like the ground, or that you don't want to move but you still want to interact with it. Clear collision will just clear the collisions from it. And we have a copy active button down here. So this will save time. You can change certain settings and just copy from that active one. An important thing, if you're not familiar with rigid bodies, is to understand the different types of collision. So for instance, we have this ramp here that's not actually colliding the way we want it to. And that's because the default collision setting is a convex hole, this collision hole button down here. So you enable that, and that'll bring up this wireframe for you to see. And so this is what your vehicle's actually colliding with. And so a convex hole is basically like the basic shrink wrap version of your object, so it's not exact. So for some certain objects, you do want to use a mesh shape collision. This ramp needed to be changed to a mesh shape, and since it's using a modifier here, in order to get that smoothness, you also have to change the source to final. And so the reason why this isn't default is because if you have a high poly count object and you try to collide it using the mesh collision, it can result in a crash if it's like super high, and generally just doesn't handle well. So these are some of the issues I even came across while working on this tutorial. I thought this might be a collision issue, but this is actually a modeling issue. So notice our vehicle just falls through our ramp here. We can visualize this by enabling face orientation. You notice that our face is actually backwards, so everything else is blue. If you see red, it means your normals are facing backwards. So a quick fix is to go to your mesh under normals and go ahead and flip. If anything's red and you have issues, that's probably your problem. The bigger your object is, the slower it is. So if you scale down your object, you'll still have the same slowness. So the reason for that is because you need to apply your scale. So the easy way is just to reapply the active collision. So this is something to look out for. Any report errors or something like that, traceback errors that you come across, please let me know. I'll have a Discord set up so you can report stuff, any errors that you come across. All right, so I think that's it. I still have a lot of plans, a lot of things I want to do, but development's gonna, depend on people's interest and support and my own personal sanity. So I'm going to continue working on it and improving things. Let me know if you have any ideas or stuff in the Discord channel, and I'll hop on there and try to help people out if they're having issues with it. It's really important to me that people are, satisfied with this. So that's why it's been taking so long. But yeah, have fun. I hope you like it, and it's just the beginning, so stay tuned.